Knight of Weymouth from TES Global, Bron Duly of RM Books, Jane Mann of Cambridge University Press, and Liz Tribe from Hodder Education Group to take their seats up here. Each one of those, if you could all come up at the same time, each one of them is going to give us a 5-minute perspective on the current playing field seen from their angle. Then we'll have a focused discussion, audience and panel together, and at some point that will broaden out into a more general debate about all of the issues we've touched on today and any others that you, the audience, want to talk about. I want to be quite clear, this is a seminar. It's not a Q&A, it's not a conference where you're there and they're here. It's a seminar. If you want to pick up a point made by somebody else across the room or by somebody online, by all means, make those comments. They don't have to be questions, they can be comments. And I'd like you to take issue with each other as well. All I'm asking is that you do it through the chair. So, first of all, we've got Jane Mann. She's an experienced publisher, author, editor and trainer, and is the newly appointed Director of Education Reform at Cambridge University Press. Involved in educational publishing since 1996, she's implemented and managed publishing programs to support various international and national curricula, and also contributed to CUP's development of new resources to support the latest UK educational reform. Jane has worked on process redesign and best practice in resources with international ministries of education as well, so she's going to have lots to say. Thanks, Jane.
Thank you, Bennett. And speaking of lots to say, I was under the impression we had 10 minutes, so this is going to be an incredibly whistle-stop tour. So I wanted to talk a bit about not only what principles can help us improve in the practice of the creation of teaching and learning resources, but also how they can influence evaluation by awarding organisations and students and teachers alike, which will lead to high-quality materials that will really give support, genuine support in the classroom. I think that transnational studies of textbooks and their usage in classrooms can give us rich data about the role that high-quality textbooks play in impacting education systems around the world. We can tell from the TIMSS surveys, for instance, that those countries that score highest in maths and science at grades 4 and 8 are also those countries where there is heaviest textbook usage and where textbooks are used routinely by teachers in classrooms as a basis for instruction. However, what these studies can't tell us on their own is how the textbooks impacted the outcome of the students, and to pluck one of these examples out of context and to try to replicate the experience in another jurisdiction with a completely different set of control factors at a different point in time with different regulatory factors and systems in place would be deeply unscientific and would not generate the same results. One of the themes that does emerge, however, out of these studies of how resources positively impact education systems is the presence of appropriate control factors applied effectively in alignment with and in coherence with other elements in the system. And conversely, in education systems that are failing, there is always a lack of control factors or a lack of coherence, or most often a lack of both. So, where does control exist? Well, in some international contexts, the control factors concerning the quality of resources come directly from the state. State approval of textbooks used in alignment with other factors has had very strong impact in some jurisdictions, Singapore, Hong Kong, and historically in the Finnish model as well. But in other contexts, like in the UK, state approval is not the most appropriate mechanism, and instead the control of quality must come from different means. So from the supply side, from the publishers and the awarding organisations often that endorse those materials and the relationship between the two, and also from the schools and the teachers and the demands that they make on those materials and what they choose in their evaluation of them. But in order for this process to actually have control over the system, we all need to meet in the middle and decide what quality looks like. And really to avoid some kind of reductivist teaching to the test of the teaching and the resources. So the stakeholders and decision makers really need to know what high quality looks like. And while this can sometimes be challenging, we do need to have meaningful conversations about definitions and criteria and how to ensure that high quality is demanded at every stage of the system. And this is where I think an objective, evidence-based set of principles and criteria that's been derived from extensive research can actually provide a very useful tool. when used in coherence throughout a system, because such principles give us a common terminology and a basis for dialogue. So these principles, when used by publishers to inform the design of textbooks through project briefs and review and development criteria, offer a reliable vision of what good looks like. And the specific publisher can generate what they need from that and decide which features they'll employ in their resources. But one way of doing this, at Cambridge University Press, our content and development team came up with a quality scorecard. And this was, in essence, a distillation of the Cambridge principles, as well as the Publishers Association and BISA guidelines issued last year. This quality scorecard provides a useful first-pass diagnostic tool for publishers to assess material against agreed baselines. It provides valuable direction for further development of materials. And it's a way of generating some very fixed quantitative points in what's most often a very qualitative practice, and therefore perhaps tempering some of the subjectivity that can enter into evaluation. I'm going to horrify my colleagues by skipping over the next slide, which is actually examples of our material, because actually I want to come on to talk about how those principles need to be used then by the awarding organisations in alignment with the publishers. So without an endorsement context, where the publishers, within an endorsement context, where the publishers are focusing on improving quality, it's really important that the criteria used by the awarding organisations to evaluate material are in alignment and that we all agree on what good looks like in both camps. So an Ofqual survey of 2012 revealed that teachers and students feel that endorsement lets them know easily that a resource meets a certain standard of quality. It provides positive assurance to the public about the quality of the resource to support effective teaching and learning, rather than being instrumentally oriented and overly narrow in focus on exam preparation. So the endorsement logo or statement on the resources thus clearly conveys huge credibility and reliability to that resource and to those who made it. But the Ofqual research also showed that there is a lack of understanding of what a good textbook looks like. And I think that this is a concern, obviously, because if we are all striving to achieve good, but we don't understand what good looks like, then that's a problem. It also shows that, in the words of Spider-Man or Voltaire, depending on what your reading habits are, with great power also comes great responsibility. And it's vital that we make sure that the badge of endorsement is genuinely used as a badge of quality. And the publishers and the awarding organisations must have ongoing dialogue about how that's used and what that means. So if we come on to our last stakeholders, our most important stakeholders in the system, these, of course, are the teachers and students. So the statement I quoted earlier from Ofqual, that there's a lack of understanding about what good looks like, goes for teachers and students too. And a set of guiding principles and criteria in the hands of teachers could therefore be a very important part of their evaluation toolkit, which, added to their own deep understanding of their particular students and the makeup of their classrooms, can inform which resources will suit them best. So not so long ago, as we've all been talking about, there was a worrying anti-textbook ethos amongst teachers. And to a certain extent in the UK is still there, but it does feel as though there is a move now towards a deeper understanding of the positive impact that quality textbooks can have in the classroom, the resource ecology that Professor Lambert was talking about. Unlike other types of resources, textbooks are already part of the system. And I love this quote from Ball and Cohen. It talks about the fact that they are concrete and daily. They are the stuff of lessons and units and of what teachers and students do. So that centrality affords curriculum materials a uniquely intimate connection to teaching. Now, of course, the level to which a textbook is used in a classroom is a matter of personal choice from teacher to teacher. And there are thousands of different points on that spectrum, from 100% reliance to no use at all. And that's as it should be, because there are thousands of different classrooms with thousands of different students and teachers within them. And any resource worth its salt must allow the teacher enough professional space to tailor their teaching to the class. Quality textbooks empower teachers to do what they do best. They don't replace the teacher. As Dr. Morgan's study showed, they free up the teacher's time to focus on the teaching. And a central point of reliable material, which has been created subject to a number of quality control factors, must surely be a positive addition to any teaching and learning. Part of what Fei Chen described as the armoury, and I love that description, it's an armoury. So textbooks shouldn't be feared as instruments of state or exam board control, but instead trusted because of the control factors and quality principles that they're subject to and products of. So really, in order to make sure that quality is coming out of that, we need to make sure that the decisions made over which textbooks to buy by teachers are based on a set of principles and a trust in that badge of endorsement. When all the control factors in that system align, it becomes this virtuous circle. And these principles are just the start of the conversation. It's up to the publishers now and the other agencies to open up the dialogue about how to use these principles in practice. What we do have now with the PA guidelines and Tim's principles here is a common language about resources, a terminology to describe what we know works in materials, and thus a way to have more meaningful conversations about them instead of relying on marketing, spin, or subjective interpretations. This language means our dialogue can be more meaningful and can only lead to an increased awareness and understanding of what good looks like, why, and how to achieve it. And I hope I reduced in time.
Thank you very much, Jane. And next, we're joined by Liz Tribe. Liz is Group Managing Director of Hodder Education, one of the top 3 providers of curriculum materials to the education market in the UK and the market leader in international schools publishing. The Hodder Education Group also provides a growing range of products and services to teachers and students, including assessment and professional development, which is why we invited her.
Thank you, Bennett. So the digital edge, I spent some time thinking about what kind of digital edge I should address my remarks to for the next few minutes. Was it the edge that publishers, textbook publishers, are about to plunge over into the abyss of online free resources? I don't think so, else none of us would be here this morning. Is it the digital edge of a revolution that schools are about to embark on as everything becomes technical and nothing becomes print-based anymore? Actually, I don't think it's that either. Things are evolving in schools, no revolution going on there. So is it the edge of digital change that publishers have a duty to interpret and bring into what we do without forgetting what it is we're here for? There are so many ways in which we can improve what happens in the classroom, and technology and digital helps with that. Adaptive learning, interpersonal, personalised learning, individual learning journeys, phrases that we know and hear now, but do they help, and to what extent do they help? And what can publishers do to make sure the right digital elements are coming into our armoury of resources? What still matters most to teachers and to pupils are the things that have always mattered and always will matter to teachers and pupils. And publishers, we can help with saving teachers time, with supporting them in the classroom, with providing some real outcomes and classroom benefit, and with a nod to the free resources, making sure that what we do is affordable to teachers. So as publishers, and some examples from what Hodder does, unashamedly, in our digital support that we provide through our platform Dynamic Learning, one of the ways in which we can save teachers time, and other publishers will do the same, is to bring materials together and help teachers with those basic elements that they always need, for instance, the lesson plan. We can bring together an overview of the lesson, some great videos, animations, resources. We finish off with worksheets. What fascinates me after 6 years of an online provision to schools is which resources teachers use most and download most. And actually, it's not the videos and the animations. It is the worksheets, the lesson plans, the structures and the schemes. That's what we're really helping them and saving time for teachers by providing. In terms of support, again, we bring it all together by providing a coherent structure to all of our resources and bringing together the animations and the worksheets and the assessment for pupils, formative assessment along the way, summative assessment at the end of tests, good reporting of that data that teachers can then gather. But what's important is that we don't overload teachers. Research has been carried out by many people, Christina Preston is one of them from MirandaNet, about what teachers can actually deal with in the classroom. And what she found, which she called very sophisticated and considered feedback to her questionnaires and her focus groups, was an emotion of anger from some teachers that they were faced with so much data that it was a waste, they couldn't use it, too much going on. Digital can go too far because it can do so much, but what teachers need is support to enable them to deliver what they need to deliver. And in terms of classroom benefit, it's bringing the whole thing together. The textbook is still of central importance. I take issue with the idea it's out of date the minute it's published. The concepts and principles that we bring together in a good textbook do not go out of date. But what you can do with digital, of course, is bring in up-to-date elements, case studies, examples, changes in the weather, whatever it might be, together with the assessment, the e-textbook version, if that's what schools want. It's not for us to say whether they should use print or e. We know, and there's a lot of evidence, that if you're learning deep concepts, a print textbook is much the best way to use that. But an e-textbook might be handy for homework, for revision, for classroom use. We can provide all of those things together. And what the publishers do is bring that pedagogy of purpose into one place, whether it's digital or print. And affordability, of course, is the duty to do what we can do, not take every technological possibility, overinvest in our resources and our platforms, and then end up with something that no one can afford to use. We have to enable coherence and purpose to what we do, but at the same time, we have to deliver evidential value for money, else teachers will go to TES Global or wherever else if they can't afford to buy what we can offer them. And as to finish with, the most unlikely image after Spider-Man, I think, for this morning is, I think the edge we have to worry about is the consumer edge of service to teachers and to schools. We are all shoppers online now. We all go to Amazon, Tesco, John Lewis, wherever. And as increasingly we see teachers coming to us online to buy not only our digital resources but our print, we have a relationship with schools and a two-way conversation with our teachers and our users, and we need to live up to what they find digitally elsewhere in the world. That's the edge I think we have to worry about. Thank you.
And after that incisive introduction to TES Global, I'm going to introduce Lord Knight of Weymouth. Jim is the Chief Education Officer of TES Global and Chair of HTI Academies. He was a Labour MP from 2000-2010 and is the former Schools and Employment Minister, and became a life peer in 2010. He's long been a supporter of UK online centres and is passionate about the benefits of being online can provide for everybody, so he's in the right place to tell us about TES Global is not exactly a publisher, but I thought it was important to have somebody like this coming along to give us a different perspective. Jim.
Thanks very much, Ben. And I want to start in St David's in South Wales, where a number of years ago there was a woman who was a community artist and a dinner lady, and was persuaded by a head teacher at a new, fully inclusive school to come and work as a learning support assistant for a child with cerebral palsy. And Bev started to develop teaching resources so that that child could be fully included in all of the learning. And soon her colleagues wanted to use those resources and share them, not just in the school, but then in the town, and then in the district, and then across Wales, and then globally. And Bev ended up, by the time she sadly died 2 years ago after a battle with cancer, she ended up being shared in over 150 countries around the world with over 7 million resources shared. Since she's died, that's increased. Her legacy remains. I just had a look. It's over 12 million uses of her resources that we currently have on the site. And that shows that there is a demand for an alternative to the traditional textbook as user-generated content. But crucially, I think, and more importantly, there is demand for not reinventing the wheel. And the most important resource for teachers is time. And right at the heart of this conversation we're having today is what is best for time-poor teachers to be better at their job. And there's a whole, we have 8 million, just over 8 million registered users on the TES resources site. We have over 1 million downloads a day of those resources. there's a range in quality. There's a range in quality in textbooks. We've heard about that over time from David and now from some of the other speakers. It's a constant battle to find the best content for any teacher to use in their classroom with their children in their context. And of course there is a place for textbooks. To some extent I'm Daniel in the lion's den, but it helps me to say there is a place for textbooks, for authoritative, pedagogically sound places, sets of content that curate both subject knowledge and that best pedagogic approach and are well aligned to the curriculum. But there's a cost to that. There's not only a financial cost. I was with some subject associations yesterday, including a primary head teacher. Because of budgetary constraints, she now has just £25 for geography, for curriculum content for next year. That's a reality that many heads are currently grappling with. If they're paper, they're liable to be single media. We've heard they may or may not be old. They may be late for new specifications that government rushes out following curriculum reviews. And teachers need something while they're waiting for those textbooks to come along. And they may be harder to personalise for the range of different pupils that you are teaching. And there is then the arguable issue of the extent to which they are top-down curated as opposed to curated in a more bottom-up way. Now, a lot of those are dealt with by digital textbooks, and we've heard about the benefits of digital from around the world. And so I think there is a false dichotomy here between the textbook and the digital resource, and the road to educational hell is, of course, paved with false dichotomies, as Michael Barber once told us. There are different subjects, and textbooks and open resources have different places according to different subjects. There are different teachers, there are different learners. In the end, I get excited about the notion of co-creation with an audience of teachers around some core quality content that is well aligned. And that might be an opportunity for our audience to work with publishers, to work with subject associations, to work with schools who are creating that core content. But I think we can have the best of both worlds, and then we can have more BEVs who I would suggest, struggle to be recognised and published in a traditional publishing forum, have more BEVs out there helping teachers not have to reinvent the wheel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim. And our final speaker is Bron Duly. Bron is the educational specialist for RM Books and has been working with schools across the UK, helping them to embed ebooks. Coming from a teaching background, she's always been passionate about engaging students in reading, as well as enabling the use of technology to affect whole school improvement. So she worked closely with the National Literacy Trust on a study that proved that using ebooks increases boys' reading progress and makes them keener and more confident readers. So integrating technology with reading is definitely having an impact, and she hopes to enthuse teachers and learners alike as to its benefits. Bron.
Thank you, Bennett. Yes, I come from a teaching background. I taught for 19 years in a sixth form college in Cardiff. For me, the textbook was the focal part of my delivery in an ever-changing curriculum. I felt it was the anchor, really, for both myself and my students. I've now moved on and I'm working with the RM Books team, part of RM Education, and it's been really interesting working with the National Literacy Trust as well to see the impact that ebooks, including e-textbooks, can actually have. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about that to start off with. With the National Literacy Trust, we had 45 schools who actually signed up. The studies sort of ranged from 10 months down to sort of even 6 weeks, the project. But this sort of gives a summary. Average project 4.2 months. Boys' reading levels went up by 8.4 months. The percentage of boys finding reading to be difficult fell from 28% to 15.9%. The percentage of students who enjoyed reading on paper increased, and this for me was key. That went up from 10% to 40%. So it's not just digital versus print-based, it's about the whole thing together. Reluctant readers who enjoyed reading using technology rose from 49.2% to 64.2%. Boys who thought reading is cool, so it's all about attitudes as well, rose from 34.4% to 66.5%. And boys reading for longer using technology, that also rose from 8.1% to 24.5%. So that I found very, very interesting, coming from a teaching background where print was a predominant way of taking things forward. So some of the benefits of e-textbooks. Now, RM Books is a leading e-book provider for schools, and it has brought out now something called book notes. So on any book, and including textbooks, and this is where I've seen it's had a lot of impact, you can actually add text, you can add hyperlinks, you can embed YouTube clips, you can have sound files, even like a podcast, you can add downloaded video content, images, attachments, and you can even create your own quizzes. And they actually sit on top of a book. Now, students as well, they can create their own notes, their own comments, they can add their own bookmarks. It's also searchable. You can look for a word within a book. You can also look a word up in an online dictionary. So the book notes feature as well, you can add your own quizzes. Now this can be part of the end of a chapter, or it could also be sort of throughout the chapter, just to test knowledge and skills. And it's got a quiz facility that has automated marking, so you can collate the results very quickly, so you can easily, in a lesson, see how understanding has taken place by your students. So some of the further benefits, you can create that e-book library for textbook use, so that when students go home, they can borrow a book from the online library. It can be a short-term rental, maybe even a day, and they can have access to that. Now, I work with lots of schools who have high percentages of students of free school meals. For them, when they go home, the unfortunate part is they don't have access to physical books, which for me is horrendous. But they may have access to a device. So you can actually use an e-book library if you have a device at home. There's online reporting, so you can check the amount of reading that's taken place by your students, the number of page turns, the time spent reading. There are page tints for students who have reading difficulties, whether it's eye stress or it could be dyslexia. You can download books and you can read them offline, including sort of textbooks with all of these lovely sort of annotations built onto them. You can share annotations between teachers, which disseminates best practice and reduces teacher workload. It supports deep learning by attaching supplementary resources, whether it is a hyperlink, whether it is a great YouTube clip. It can be instant. It could be an article that's come up within the last sort of day or so, and you can put that on top of your textbook. Annotations can be refined through monitoring and evaluation to ensure quality as well. So you can constantly update these annotations. So a case study, Harris Academy in Dundee, they looked at closing the attainment gap with interactive electronic textbooks. They wanted to engage and stimulate young people, especially those who are hard to reach. They added all of these lovely annotations, the audio, video, the links, text discussion. Students were able to look at words, highlight text, make their own notes, and reply to the teachers' discussions through what's the comments facility. And this has broadened the opportunities in that school for learning, and students have become far more independent in their approach. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, I think that's a fascinating start because we're now getting on to the real bit, which is the discussion. I just want to remind everybody that, of course, we also have Fei Chen Lee, Debbie Morgan and Professor David Lambert, who are sitting in the front row, and I will actually jump on them if I see something that I think needs their attention, but I'm obviously expecting them to join in. And I thought we would start, this is your seminar, so you take it in a different direction if you like, but we can start on that print versus, if people are going to allow me to have a false dichotomy, print versus online. Versus digital. And interesting, GCSE maths tutor from London called Bridget Jones. I have to say, I think that's a bit suspect as a name, but let's assume it is Bridget Jones. I still love textbooks. So many of my students get given online homework and have no easy access to previous work for reference. I'm going to throw that out as a generic thing because we've talked about the way in which you can blend textbooks and digital, but you do come across this kind of differentiator between different kinds of students and what they can do.
Absolutely right, and that's where having both a print textbook and an e-textbook can be very helpful, because then you do have the reference at home if a student can access or download. But the blended point is the real point. I think what we're saying is you need these resources together. We can do some things in different and better ways, online and digitally, but there are other things that the print textbook is absolutely the king of the way of addressing and learning. So it's not either or, it is both.
And if the digital resource that Bridget's talking about was curated well on a platform that they have reasonable access to, there's no reason why they can't access what they've consumed before. There's no reason why they couldn't look at what might come. Yeah, the technology is there if it's well designed.
But I think well designed is the key, because I clearly remember my son struggling with a maths homework online that he was set, which involved a mouse click, and he was very young and he couldn't do the mouse click quick enough, and he was shouting out the answer and yet he couldn't click on it. So actually the homework was testing how quickly he could use a mouse, not testing his arithmetic. So I think the design is crucial in there.
Anybody from the audience want to come in? We've got now a professor of the University of Helsinki, Lena Krokfors, is saying, so her takeout from what we've just been saying is, so the opposite to textbooks is not virtual materials, but out-of-school learning environments. It's interesting, it's a whole new... Yeah, the opposite to textbooks is actually
want to put the two things against each other,
out-of-school learning environments. No?
No.
OK. Well, he better send us another text, and or she better send us another text explaining what she's talking about.
I would say you could possibly teach geography without teaching out of school.
Yeah.
You also can't really teach geography without digital materials, particularly moving images.
Yes.
But I say you can't teach geography either effectively without a textbook, because I mean I've quoted my daughter, who is now 32 years old, incessantly about this, because she was a national curriculum guinea pig. She'd done the national curriculum from 5. And she gave up geography at 14, and I interrogated her about this, of course. She told me, "Dad, I just don't see the point." And deeper discussion, she explained to me that geography to her was just a whole lot of disconnected stuff. And a really good textbook, the whole point is to provide a whole, a story, a narrative.
And then we will see the development of virtual reality. So I've had a conversation with one virtual reality company who, the technology exists. You could go to, let's say, St. Paul's, point your phone at St. Paul's, it would recognise that it's St. Paul's. It could then, you could show a timeline of that part of London. You could show what it looked like in Roman times. You could look at the physical geography before Roman times. You could see the whole of the urban geography develop around that part of London. Now, that's not user-generated content. And in many ways, that's a modern textbook. But it is freeing us, to some extent, from the construct that we have, that some people have, about what a textbook is.
Yes, at the back.
Hi, I'm Aisling Brown from the Stephen Peirce Foundation, and as some of you will have heard, possibly endlessly, we are 6 schools and we do publish our own digital textbooks for free, but one of the things that we've found really helpful in that is that it really facilitates teacher CPD around our 6 schools and beyond, and it means that we can very quickly react to the things that the teachers are wanting, students are wanting, parents are wanting. So 2 days after the publication of one of our primary books, a student in, I think it was China, emailed or their parent. The child was 3 and didn't quite have the motor skills to click exactly on it. It was a counting the socks thing, so you click and hear the counting and then see the counting. And so we were able to expand the click point and move on really quickly. Update was there within 24 hours. And I think that's something that the digital thing really provides us with, is that instant response. And I think also the ownership of, as you were saying, the annotation and all of that sort of thing, the co-creation is something that's really key. And as you said, Liz, it's not about substitution. That's the very lowest thing that you would want in, for example, your SAMR construction. What you really want is is a redefinition that builds upon and evolves from your traditional tools and moves forward.
But is there not research that says that reading print more deeply embeds learning? Can anybody...
There's a lot of research.
Right.
Yeah, but and there is a difference. So the OECD research that was published around students and reading online is very interesting around some different sets of skills, in that reading paper books is pretty much about start at the beginning and go on till you reach the end and then stop, but with the use of index so you can duck in and out. Reading online is a different set of skills around following links, going off into different places, coming back, and that's more complicated. It's a different set of skills.
I think also it's
But a very important set of skills in the modern world. Sorry.
I'm also doing my PhD in that area, and it is something that's in its infancy. For example, hyperlinks are if you've got very many of them, you've got a lot of impairment. But I think with careful design, for example, we're layering extension work under photographs so that you're not distracted from the main narrative, but that it's there. But it's also important to realise that it's not about, or that's something that we try and do with ours, is that it's not purely about text, especially with the very young ones. You've got to be able, one of the great things about the digital is balancing both the visual and the auditory to really enhance and raise your, or we feel that it does really enhance and raise both your visual and your auditory processing to maximise learning.
Without auditory overload?
We're very carefully, or we try to very carefully, and that's one of the things that I'm looking at with my research, is trying to very carefully balance it and see the effects.
Right. Tim?
I mean, it's this careful balancing that you refer to which we're really advocating here. We're absolutely, forced dichotomies are extremely unproductive in this area. And Jane's presentation, I thought, was fantastic in terms of the extent to which we have to look at what constitutes quality. It's even more critical when there can be very easy supply of digital materials to discriminate between the high quality and the low quality, to discriminate between those things which will fit into the particular pedagogical approach in this particular institution with these particular learners and so on. So rising above these false oppositions, thinking about what the criteria for quality are, how they can be applied in respect to these complex relationships, this is the debate which we're having. And we summarised it just as digital is different, and had a brilliant discussion in Cambridge about it. We need to harness the assets of both, understand the deficits, and take forward both in terms of effective pedagogic models.
To some extent, Ben, I think that there's a more interesting choice between digital and digital resources and textbooks around a debate between user-generated content and commissioned content, and where quality comes into that. And I don't necessarily have any ready answers to that, but we know in the digital world of creation, there's a lot of user creation, and that can apply in music and film. We've all had our fair share of YouTube kittens. Not necessarily great quality, and working that one through in this context is a really interesting discussion to have.
So, in terms of TES Global, you're just a curator at the moment. Do you see, is TES Global thinking of becoming a quality doorway, or setting up a quality doorway? Or will you just curate any user-generated comment? There's somebody at the back next.
We're interested in the discussion and partners and how we can help teachers get most quickly to what they want. And teachers want quality. So we're interested in how we make that easier for teachers all the time.
Did I see a hand? Yes, I did.
It's a bit of a digression, but getting back to the earlier debate about paper versus online. My name is Abigail Sell, and I work for Microsoft Research in Cambridge. So I'm a big fan of the digital world, obviously, and in fact, Microsoft is developing some of the technology for doing AR, like HoloLens, you may have heard. But at the same time, I've done a lot of work on how people use paper in offices. So I'm not in the education arena, but one of the things that we found out from doing these studies was that there are three main reasons why paper is good when you are doing what we call active reading, and that is that you can lay it out in space in very flexible ways. So you can read across documents to get a deep understanding of the materials that you're looking at. People often print so that they can read with a pen in hand because they want to interleave note-taking with the reading activities. And they want flexible navigation. So they want to be able to do this by place-holding, flipping back and forth. And our tools for the online world are incredibly bad at this. We're getting better at stylus-based interaction. We're getting better at using and interconnecting multiple displays. But we're really bad at the navigation part, for one thing. So I don't know how this translates into the educational world, but certainly in office life, paper is still a very, very important resource when you want to do that very deep engagement with materials.
Paperless officers will come in on the day I leave, I think. Over there.
Tony Gardner, maverick mathematician. I feel that so much is going on that it's almost impossible to focus. The excitement of technology and media and other things makes it difficult to focus on what I thought was Tim's use of, or the title's use of textbook count, was using textbooks as a peg to try and discriminate between those who are doing something well, which we might be missing out on, and those who are not doing it so well. I only understand mathematics, but I suspect things generalize. What is it that some books and systems get wrong? In mathematics, almost all textbooks or media resources or whatever are seriously flawed and do not help. The project Debbie was talking about involves 2 resources. One appears to be markedly more effective than the other to this observer. At some point, we've got to start making the quality distinctions, and we've got to have some criteria for doing it, and I don't hear a discussion that is making progress in that. We've got to actually see what it is we get wrong, and for me in mathematics, what's missing is the word didactics. I can understand subject content, I can understand subject knowledge, but the details of how particular important ideas are developed and embedded within the surrounding, what goes before and what comes after. This is a very subtle, and Tim used the word complex, process which I don't think we understand, and I'm afraid there is a lot of antipathy towards the idea of textbooks and the idea of some things being good developments and some things being unhelpful developments out there, which we're going to have to fight with for a long time, I think.
So that sounded remarkably like a sort of slightly more challenging version of what David was saying was happening in geography, in the sense that textbooks up till now have not given you that whole sense of what geography is, where it's going, and its heart.
Many haven't. I mean, I'm very interested in this idea of subject didactics, which is a discourse that we don't really have in this country. They do in Finland and Germany and the Nordic countries. I think the questions raised have different solutions and different responses in different subjects. That's what's so exciting. I mean, in my subject, there is a real difficulty in expressing what it means to think geographically in a way that is perhaps more readily available in, say, thinking historically. I mean, we can debate these things. But geography is such a broad discipline. It spreads from the earth sciences through to social sciences. It's really difficult to recontextualize this discipline, which definitely exists, and it's a very successful discipline and very influential one in the universities where new knowledge is being created, into a school subject, which has a completely different function. Its function is to educate. But how do you recontextualize that discipline to the school subject is a really interesting problem.
So Bennett.
Okay. Sorry, no, we've got another person at the back. Are you going to pick up on this point or move on to something else?
Me?
Yes,
I was.
Yes. Okay. So we continue this strand for a little, and I'll come back to Liz and
Yes,
Tim afterwards.
it was actually directly linked to something David just said, which is, Jane, you sort of mentioned a triadic relationships of publishers, awarding bodies, and teachers, I think, was it, yeah? Where in that are the academics who are doing the new knowledge? Previously, I know in the past there's been a close relationship, say, between UCLs and academics working at the university. But as far as I know, I think there have been fairly dramatic structural changes since the 80s in the awarding bodies. And I wonder whether they're still there, whether they still have the same weighting and what their role is, because it seems to me that that's where the kind of foundational model of your knowledge by which you derive the criteria, whether digitally or on paper, to assess whether this is a good question or that's a bad phrasing. And I do think language is crucial here. You know, when I look at, my subject is literature, and when I see a question like, what do you think makes this a good episode? I just cringe, because there's no criteria to guide, no criteria of relevance to guide the person. There's no kind of referencing to any kind of skill, of whether it's a comprehension or a summary or a précis that's needed. All that rich language that were in old question papers seems to be missing, and I'm just wondering why.
Can I just come in in terms of, in terms of language, when I went to China and spoke to the ministry there about how they create their textbooks, even within the mathematics textbooks, they gather all the expertise, including linguists, because language is key within a textbook, and the use of the language had to communicate, and the precise mathematical language, and picking up on the point about that you need real expertise to develop textbooks, real subject expertise, linguist expertise, all sorts of expertise. But in particular, what has attracted the teachers I've worked with across the country, including the mastery specialist teachers I'm developing at the moment, is the mathematics, how the mathematics is presented. And they say, oh, wow, why didn't I see it like that before? What a good way to communicate. What a good way to understand it. So I think there is a real issue in getting real expertise into the development of textbooks in order that they become the quality products, in order then that they support that deep and conceptual learning.
And I think that ties back what both David and Tony were talking about is the top-down, bottom-up debate. And to my mind, what's wrong with top-down is actually incredibly important. The expertise of the author, which may well relate back to academic knowledge or research. Many of our history books, for instance, you go to the back and the list of references is extraordinarily long because they've done their academic research. The expertise of the top-down authorship is to then translate that and distill it and put it into the language that's appropriate for the age of the pupil. And I think a lot of work is being done. And in terms of moving forward, Tony, I think both Tim's principles and the BISA guidelines are incredibly important steps in helping publishers start to think about how they need to approach improving the quality.
Tim?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, Debbie and I reviewed a whole series of mathematical materials around the world, and we were our first take across them was to be very aware of the very problems which Tony is outlining. What we're trying to do in the principles is indeed take that additional step away beyond our understanding of the problems to try to make sure that any development discussions do not ignore considerations of the nature of the domain, the way in which the progression is devised within the materials and so on. We decided not to do subject-specific criteria. BISA and PA have done a very good first take at that in respect of the English setting. And we wanted to make sure that for any group of people, and whoever that group is, awarding body, publisher, the state, schools, whatever, that they have a series of things that they must remember to discuss. And it includes absolutely consideration of the things that you're outlining, Tony. I hope that what we will see, and I've seen it in some subjects already, is the emergence of texts to which we can point and say, yes, that's what we mean. Because we can write the longest principles in the world, and it still won't necessarily give rise in everybody's minds to what constitutes quality. We will need, alongside them, examples to which we can point and say, that's what we mean when we talk about considering the domain. That's what we mean when we talk about effective progression in the subject.
Thank you. At the back.
Hello, Caroline Wright from BESA. An observation and then a request, if I may. First of all, it's just so lovely to hear such a positive discussion about digital and textbooks. Too often it's one against the other, and actually I think the work that Tim's done with the publishers has been incredibly helpful in this. Then just another request is not to forget hands-on resources and practicals too, because actually for younger children, you know, hands-on resources and songs and so on can really help support textbooks and digital learning. When you get to the older children, actually practical science experiments and assessments really help too. So I think the key is the quality, which is great to touch on. So with quality other resources as well, linked with textbooks in whatever's the appropriate format, I think it's a really healthy debate, and it's good to hear.
We've got a fair number of academics in the room, so I just want to take this one step further. Gideon Williams, who works in digital leadership in Southampton. By the way, did anyone ask what students want? Now, I think that's a fair question to ask. We've got publishers, we've got academics. Has anybody actually gone out and asked the students how they best do it?
Yes, of course. When we developed the latest UK materials at Cambridge University Press, there was extensive interviews with students, what they liked, what worked, and obviously there is a face value on what they're saying, and also there's a deeper understanding of what they're saying, and it's really important to take both and to recognise what comes out of it as being what's useful. And there's no point in putting something in front of a student which will have no real life relevance. So what? So what? Why am I learning this? So absolutely we asked what students want. But I also wanted to quickly reply to the question about academics, because we also asked what the academics want. We did extensive research with the university to find out what happens. First of all, what's coming through at tertiary level. There is a failure of maths and physics students. How can we address that in the textbooks? There is a lack of understanding of the language that needs to be used in various subjects. And that's something that the academics were telling us. So when it comes to, you know, this Cecil B. DeMille cast of thousands that goes into the production of a textbook, absolutely it needs to come from students, it needs to come from the academics, but also from the teachers, from the parents, and from this recognition of what's working elsewhere. So yeah, it's a holistic process.
So Bron, I want to pick up, because you've got some data that says they read better online, as it were. Are those textbooks, or is that the reading for pleasure drive, which is actually equally important with textbooks? But have you seen the same thing in relation to textbooks?
The study itself was a mixture. It was sort of reading for pleasure and the use of textbooks, and it went from primary students all the way up to A-level students. I think we were seeing a lot of, like, the older students are using e-textbooks to support their learning. Maybe, again, it's having access to a physical book, but also access to the e-textbook when they get home. So that's where that sort of distinctions come.
Yes, Fee.
We definitely take the needs of the students, and in fact for me every book that we do, we go out and get the opinions of the students. We develop some of them with the students. In fact, there was one series that we did, and they were the ones who told us that they found that that subject did not apply to them in the real world. Like, why do I have to study geography, or why do I have to study history? I'll never use it. And that was how we came up with this thing called Do You Know? Because we realized that we needed to tie them back. The principles of what was taught in the classroom, we needed to bring them back into application, that you could actually apply it in the real world where you are. These are the sort of things that would come in useful. So I think most publishers would definitely go to the students and find out what they want and what they need.
Ben, I would just retell something that was told to me yesterday over lunch from a subject association related to history of a textbook that was well used for history A-level, that students valued because it got them through the A-level, it got them good grades in the A-level, and that was the demand from students. But because too many A-level history students were wedded to that textbook and that interpretation, it was then a problem at university for those history students to be unwedded from the set text and to be taught to properly research and look at different sources. And so it's very important to listen to learners, but sometimes learners' motivations are the motivations that we give them, which is you've got to get good grades in your A-levels.
Fair point. Middle of the back there, and then this lady here.
Yeah, I think it's really important to keep questioning the students. That's, again, coming back to the digital, because that's my area of interest. It makes it a lot easier. So we're 6 schools, but we also work with schools around the UK particularly, and can instantly send a section of a book to a primary classroom and say, you know, and they'll video the students interacting with them and seeing how it works. And I'd say that's the same with the traditional publishers, that it's, or not traditional publishers, but actual publishers, that it's a lot easier to work like that in the digital front. But also getting back to what you were saying about the hands-on resources, that it is something that it is really important that the resources can be made their own by the students. So, for example, in our physics books that we're just writing at the moment, there are spaces for students to put in their own videos and their own pictures, saying, right here, I want you to put in a photograph of, say, a parallel circuit, and the information is there, but then you write your own conclusion about what happens to the 2 bulbs or something underneath it, and then you can uncover different things. And I think it's really important to add that tailored experience. It's something that all textbooks can offer as well. And again, it's consulting with the teachers and the students at an ongoing basis in design as well as later on.
I'm glad you said that, because I'm noticing a worldwide attack on the dangerous level of togetherness that we're experiencing in this room. Kane Kalinske from Oregon is saying that traditional textbooks are a barrier to personalised learning in education, and I think you've almost answered that just as is. But also, Lena Crockforce, again from Helsinki, is saying that the trouble with textbooks is they reflect the core national curriculum, not the local curriculums, and she's sort of raising the dichotomy of curriculum versus child-centred learning, which is a bit like Oregon in that textbook is standing in the way of personalised learning. Now, I'm going to assume you're all going to deny that, so who wants to go first?
No, actually, you can't deny that. A print textbook is not a personalised experience because you print it once and hope to sell thousands of copies.
Yeah, but she says barrier to
yeah, well,
personalised learning.
What you have to, so if a child goes to school and has a curriculum to follow, it's not a personalised curriculum. It is a curriculum that has been laid down and has been developed for good reason in that country and in that context. I think it's incredibly important to publish specifically for particular markets and dedicated curricula. And we would never try and publish something for the UK and then sell it elsewhere. We publish particularly and locally for different market and curricula. But if you send a child to school, or even if you home educate them, there is a culture and a curriculum that is whole and entire to that country.
I think also it is possible to make sure that carefully designed resources enable students to have some element of personalised learning, with things like little diagnostic elements at the start of a unit, so that allow the student to, it says to the student, this is what's about to happen. Are you ready for it? Here's a checklist of whether you're ready for it. If you're not, maybe you could go back and look at these specific things. And every single student will have a different experience by using that sort of first diagnostic check. So within that fixed point, there are many routes through it which can be personalised.
Okay. So we had a couple down here. Yes, that lady there who I had in fact got lined up.
My name is Helen Seidel.
Could you take the microphone,
Sorry?
please?
Oh, I'm a visiting academic. I get very nervous about speaking in this country. I'm a visitor at Cambridge. In my most recent study, I interviewed teachers to find out what package of resources they were using in this country. I'd just like to put in a plug. All over the world, there's been an explosion of available resources. Nobody knows what resources teachers are actually using. I ended up spending a lot of time in this country because of the textbook situation here. Many teachers, the TIMSS data, for example, supports this. Teachers might be using the textbooks, but they don't rely on the textbooks. It's not what creates the narrative. You have something called the scheme of work, which needs to be factored into all of this. Pardon me, I get very nervous because of my accent. Anyway, what I want to say is, I think everywhere it needs to be studied. I focus currently on the selection. Why are teachers selecting the resources they do? Who do they trust? So in the academic research, a lot of focus has been put on how resources are being used in the classroom. Teachers are unable at this time to make evidence-based decisions. There hasn't been research on the resources that are being used. So for example, TES, in my study of 36 teachers, secondary math teachers from a variety of schools, and I'd be happy to send you the paper that shows what they are, they're choosing it for reasons other than mathematical reasons. So I'd just like to say we need to put more use into what are the packages of resources being used. They're very complex. There's no consistency at the school. So one teacher is using a set of resources to teach rational numbers that another teacher's not using. And a lot more work needs to be done by the academics, and a lot more recognition of what are they selecting and what's driving the selection. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. And if you want to upload your paper on our website, you're very happy to do so, providing it doesn't get in the way of you publishing it.
And Ken Ruthven has done some wonderful work on the scheme of work.
Yep. Right, there were a flurry of hands that all disappeared. Yeah.
John Blake, I'm a history consultant for the Harris Federation. I think I'm a little bit worried about all of this focus on the kind of the digital versus the textbook, all this sort of stuff, because it seems to me one of the most important things for history teachers, particularly in Key Stage 3, is that we just have textbooks that contain a lot more information than the ones that we've had previously. They were very, very knowledge poor. They're very, very limited amounts of writing in them. There just wasn't enough information for teachers to effectively use them to create lessons in areas where they were not already particularly expert. And I think I wouldn't want us to get overly drawn over into, do we have this digital resource, do we have that digital resource? The fundamental importance, I think, in English schools is that we just have textbooks that contain a lot more information that teachers can meaningfully use and adapt and differentiate downwards, rather than the problem that certainly I had in my career was that you always had to differentiate upwards. You would be handed textbooks that would work possibly very much at the lower end, but there really wasn't very much there to stretch and challenge. There just wasn't enough information in them.
Thank you. And then just in front of that.
Anne Sparrowhawk, I manage the endorsement team at CIE. But I wanted to comment first on the issue of what it is we value in teaching. I'm a chair of governors. I'm very conscious that Ofsted reports drive a lot of what education in England is about. Ofsted reports singularly fail to ever comment positively on seeing a lesson in which a teacher has used a textbook, and that informs a huge amount of what education happens in schools. And I think we really need to recognise the importance of addressing that as a major issue. I think also as part of the work I do at Cambridge International Exams, the issue of making sure that textbooks are indeed supporting our syllabus is a key factor. But that isn't enough. It's not good enough just to have every single bit of the syllabus covered. It's got to be covered well and with a real thought to what the class is going to be about. And I do think one of the issues that we need to address a little further is, where do authors come from? Quite often in the books we see, the author has been a teacher, has been an examiner, has worked within our examination context, but might not be current in terms of what they're doing in schools. And I think we do need to question how publishers can be helped to take the authorship really seriously and value it, but also enhance it with perhaps other approaches to classroom practice as is current today.
Thank you. Just for our overseas viewers, Ofsted is the schools inspectorate in the UK. You'll have your own inspectorate, and how you think about it probably depends on how harshly it inspects. Yes?
Can I just say something there? drawing on that comment about the regulatory environment and how that's impacting on what we can do. And I think your point about authors is a really important one, because obviously the selection of the right author for the resource is huge. And with the latest Ofqual general conditions of recognition, actually the pool of authors available to the publishers is shrinking, because with the greater restriction or the greater need for awarding organisations to monitor the activities of examiners who are also going to write, some awarding organisations have taken a zero tolerance approach to this, and they've just said, if you do anything to do with history examination whatsoever, you cannot write a history book. And this means that in some of the smaller qualifications, that pool of authors has dwindled and dwindled. And I think you're absolutely right that the currency of the people involved in those resources is what lends them the most ability to generate the right resource. And I do think that that's another conversation that needs to be happening between the regulatory environment and those of us trying to make sure that what ends up is of the best quality.
Which to some extent points to the potential for a better conversation between those that are stimulating user-generated content, stimulating new authors who are current, and the more established publishing world.
Absolutely.
That's a good point. Yes.
Hello, I'm Isabel Nisbet. I've been involved in regulation and now linked with the faculty in Cambridge. I wanted to follow up the discussion about the link with examination boards and endorsement, because I hope that something that will come out of this exercise will be principles of good practice in the current climate, in that very complex relationship. Because if you look back historically, before all the regulatory limits, when I was doing my exams in Scotland, we knew the names of the chief examiners in each subject. It was Professor McNaughton in Latin. He wrote the book, and we studied the book, and that was it. So that, and it's not, and in countries such as Ireland, that tradition and the role of the senior examiner is still felt and is very close. Now, all the things you've heard about have cut some of these links, yes. But hence you get the thing that Jim Knight referred to, and kids wanting books that will get them good grades. And the badge on the cover of the book is something that's looked at avidly. So I think there are worries and ambiguities and a need for good educationally grounded practice in this modern relationship. And I hope that that will be an offspring of this publication. Thank you.
Do you know, this always happens. Just as we're really beginning to get going, we've run out of time. I'm very sorry. I thought it was an excellent end. I'm glad about that. I'm going to leave you with two thoughts, because I want this, we want this to continue online. Just this seminar on its own is not just a standalone. It started earlier and it can continue on. So I would encourage you all to go to our website and continue to continue the discussion, and I encourage our speakers to also continue the discussion and interact with you. But there's a couple of outstanding questions that we would have moved on to, but are not going to have time. Magda Wood from TES Resources. Who sets the subject narrative in a country? The school, the classroom, the state, the author, Professor McNaughton? Who sets the subject narrative? And then from Entrust Maths in Staffordshire, the best teachers can teach with or without a textbook. A book is only as good as the hands it's in. That's a very challenging one. And we could have another entire half hour, but we have no more time to discuss any of this. So I want to thank you all. I want to thank our speakers, some of whom have come from a very great distance indeed, for engaging with us today. And thank you all. And for those of you online, thank you for your input.